Hello, friends, and welcome into another edition of Outreach Radio Chicago. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. I want to thank you so much for making us a part of your day. On today's edition of Outreach Radio Chicago, we are joined by former producer of 670 The Score and current digital content producer over at NBC Sports Chicago, the one and only Tony Gill joins us today to talk about an awesome project that he is working on, connecting friends, families, and people of all walks of life with lifelong memories in a very cool and unique way. If you are new to Outreach Radio Chicago or Mercado Airwaves, Tony Gill has joined us so many times on my sports show, Sports from the Couch, that you get wherever you get your favorite podcast at Mercado Airwaves, to talk about the Bulls and all the amazing stuff that he has worked out when it comes to the sports world here in Chicago. But on this episode of Outreach Radio Chicago, we talk about the impact of how this project is helping him in his day-to-day life. We talk about us both being in our early 20s when we cracked in this industry, and how nearly a decade later, what have we have learned and how we have implemented it from not only the real world, how we help our community, but how it has helped us day to day. And so much more. Tony's a really good guy, and if you're a sports fan here in Chicago, you know you could vouch for him that he is an awesome interview. I got to talk with the one and only Tony Gill about so many great stuff. But before we get to all that, let's take care of some housekeeping notes. You can follow us all over the universe. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media, Instagram Mike Mercado Media, and you can keep up to date with everything I'm doing outside of Outreach Radio Chicago by following me on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves and at Outreach Radio Chicago. If you have a charity, foundation, or a cool story you would like to hit the airwaves that you would like spotlighted here in the city of Chicago, send us an email over at outreachradiochicago@gmail.com. And visit us wherever you get your favorite podcast at Mercado Airwaves. Tony Gill joins us next here on Outreach Radio Chicago. I'm Mike Mercado. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Outreach Radio Chicago with Mike Mercado. We'll get right back into today's episode, but before we do that, we'd like to remind you to please follow us on Twitter at Mike M Media. You can also see what we're doing outside of Outreach Radio Chicago by following us on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. You can like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves and at Outreach Radio Chicago. Subscribe to the program on YouTube, youtube.com/Mike Mercado 2333. Listen to past episodes of Outreach Radio Chicago, interviews we've done with athletes and celebrities, and so much more wherever you get your favorite podcasts by searching Mercado Airwaves. And while you're at it, please do us a huge favor, like, rate, review, and share the shows. Want to hear us talk about a certain subject? Email us at outreachradiochicago@gmail.com or at mercadoairwaves@gmail.com. You can see what we're up to behind the scenes by following me on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. Thank you guys so much for all the support. Let's get back to today's episode of Outreach Radio Chicago with Mike Mercado. Enjoy. Tony, thank you for joining us here on Outreach Radio Chicago, man. How you been?
Great, man. Positive vibes. The world is getting crazier, but, got to keep a strong and happy face, man.
But what's funny is, and anybody who's new to Outreach Radio Chicago coming from Mercado Airwaves, we've had Tony on a bunch of times. He's amazing with his time. We talk a bunch of live basketball, everything that has to do with the sports world. But you're doing this really cool project. But beyond the project that you're starting right now, last year with a lot of the craziness that was going on, you were really part of the Chicago community. A bunch of people got together and you guys made a real big impact onto the city. And, we know the summertime's coming along and we're going to send good vibes, but the work's not done yet. So, have you kind of had that thought heading into 2021 about like what this year is going to be, how different it's going to be once we're all kind of vaccinated back out there and still seeing? I mean, we're seeing what's happening in the court right now. Like, what are your thoughts about kind of heading into the summer?
Well, it is going to be different. With just the who's getting vaccinated, who's not getting vaccinated, and things of that nature. You still want to keep people safe as possible, whatever you're doing. But there's still, like you said, there's still work to be done. There's still things to be done in our world and in our communities. So the work isn't going to stop. We got to keep going, and I think that if anything, if the last year hasn't affected you or impacted you in any way to do positive things in your area and in your community, then something's wrong. Like something's wrong. If you have the pandemic, us not being able to be together and physically touch loved ones and stuff like that, if that hasn't impacted you to do good things and just be nice to people and be cordial to people, like it's something wrong. And that's something that I think should impact people in a positive way. It's all how you take it. Some people take it bad. Some people, go into their little cubby hole and kind of shut out everything and be extremely pessimistic. I refuse to have that impact the way I view people and the way I view life. And that's just kind of how I roll.
And, it shows because not only you could see how much you love the community, your friends, your family, what you put into when it comes to your career, but also this project that you're working on. And, everybody knows that when it comes to like basketball, sports, kind of our medium, what is, digital content and producing, you're one of the top tier guys, but then you decide to do something that, I think is so damn cool. And, you even have it as the main thing. Tell your story, remember a special moment, create a keepsake you or a special person can keep forever. And, it kind of correlates with what we were talking about right now of you keeping positive vibes. And what made you think of coming up with this project to have people record voice over these memories? And, while all this craziness is going on in the world and we're trying our best to make things better, also to take a moment to kind of smell the roses and remember kind of the little things in life,
Yeah. So they actually started, I did a personal podcast just about my life that I dropped on my birthday on November 9th. And it's out there. I think it's on Anchor. I'll kind of share the link.
Yeah, please.
Again, after a while, so people can check that out. But it's just like just a personal look at where my life was at that point, turning 28, in November. And I figure I'm a producer. I produce people, and I'm always asking for them to be their authentic selves, be 100% honest on how they feel and how they express those opinions, because that's how you connect with people. People can sense authenticity, and if you're being real, it doesn't matter if they agree or disagree with you. Is the fact that they understand you on a human level. And that's the type of work and stuff that I want to do. And when I produce podcasts, when I do television features, just anything that I'm a part of, I want to make sure that people are connecting with the human version, of me, not like just the character of me. So I figured I haven't done that in a one single space. Like I've been on radio for years at 670 The Score. And people have gotten like little tidbits of, oh, wow, Tony's this crazy, person. But people didn't know my background and my history. So I interviewed, the people that were in my life at that, at that point that were important, to me. My father, I had some drops from my mom and my godfather and I interviewed Lawrence Holmes. And just it's a 2-part series that I was really proud of, and I felt really good afterwards that I was able to put all of that into one podcast and produce it, add music and just my flavor to it. And I was like, wow, I feel really good doing this. I know other people would love this feeling of being able to have a keepsake that, like, I interview my father, and I'm going to be able to keep that forever for my kids and nieces and nephews and whatever, to say, hey, do you want to know what your grandfather was like, or do you want to know what he was like when he was younger? And I figure a lot of people want to do that. So I had a couple clients so far that their stories just really impacted me, and I wanted to highlight those people that you saw in the that I have pinned on my Twitter. Just want to make just a quick promo of, like, this is what my skills are, and here's how I can help you be able to create those moments and create those um, just some special conversations that you can keep. One example was a family who adopted their daughter, and they wanted to record how they adopted her, how she came into their lives. And it was such a special podcast to put together. And that's another thing, is like, I wanted to do something meaningful. Like, sports is great. I love sports. I'm going to continue to work in sports because I enjoy laughing and all that. But I also want to do something that will impact people for a long time. And stuff that people will be able to have for a long time. And that's a big reason why I started this project.
And I feel that so much because doing Outreach Radio Chicago, you know how it is. We do so many different shows when it comes to sports, pop culture, and then being able, though, to do a show that we get to spotlight, helping women from domestic relationships, from helping out getting homes for adoption for dogs to children to helping out veterans to our community, our schools. And there's this fulfillment that you get that, I think people who see us in this industry, we have fun. I mean, it is fun. We get to talk sports and have a good time, but there's this fulfillment that you don't get because it's a superficial thing. Sports are amazing. Sports are great, but it's not real life. It's this weird dynamic because it does affect real life. But then you see a project like this, and this is why I always knew I messed with you, Tony, because my grandfather is from Mexico. He was the first generation here, and I talked to him, and all these years there was a little bit of a language barrier. My Spanish isn't all that great, but it was good enough to get me by throughout the years. But then as he's gone into his 70s, and I make a point, even during the pandemic, now that he's vaccinated, whatever the case may be, to see him and my abuela, to talk to them, hear their stories, because I've always had this dreading feeling of when they're gone, they're gone. And those stories disappear. Seeing them come and go through the mountains of Mexico to find a coyote to get them over, from the border patrol sending them back, from wondering if you're going to survive making it over here. What happens when you don't speak the language and you go from Mexico to Chicago? What is that first December like? And these stories get lost. And I think what you're doing is such a service to people, to just kind of tell them that. And that is sentimental to me. But what about, it's a macabre thing, but the father that's not going to be able to see their child grow up, the mother who's not going to be able to see their child grow up. Like, I don't think we really see how impactful that really could be for somebody, just as simple, like, now the technology to leave them a message like that.
Yeah, and that was it's funny because that's when you get people. My first couple clients, that's when I knew it was kind of confirmed to me, like, okay, this is good. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, because this is, people want to have those things. And sometimes I wonder, all right, I've kind of already mentioned the pros of this, but what are the cons, right? It's like, if somebody keeps this and somebody passes, like, will this be a hindrance to their growth in terms of how they grieve past this? And I don't want it to be that. Like, I want this to be something that you can keep, that is special, that you can spread to the rest of your families, and that they can have a reference, of, oh, I know what that person was like, because in this conversation, you're getting an intimate look at who they were. And it's not meant to be a placeholder for that person, or for you to, go back and watch every day, like, because that's not going to help with the grieving process. If this person were to pass, this is just a history mark, and something to be looked at fondly, about. And I want, and so you can remember the good times and stuff that you had with this person. Um, and that's what it's all about. It's all about, because again, once that person is gone, they're gone. Or once that time period is gone, they didn't have to be physically gone, but once a person grows up, that you don't have that time anymore. And
Right.
it's nice to remember things fondly about people that you love and people that you connect with. So yeah, this has been a such a fulfilling project for me. And just it also, I can bring the creativeness that I can from this project to my regular day job, which is producing sports. Like, a lot of people, there are not a lot of out of the box thinkers in terms of sports content. And I feel, for me, doing other things, creating other things non-sports related, also helps me with content creation in the sports platform. So it's such been a benefit just all around for me.
And it's interesting because you and I have we started really young in this industry. I'm 30. You just turned 28, right? So we both started this in our early 20s, and that being just turning into your 30s or getting to your 30s and feeling like you're almost in a rut already, but then finding that magic, that magic spark of like, oh, I can help people, my creative juices can get going, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, my content's gonna be fire. I'm gonna be awesome when I'm with Lauren Toes, or I'm gonna, me and Jason, or when we're talking Cubs or the Blackhawks, or, like, it doesn't matter. You're able to. It's like working out, right? Cardio is just as important as lifting up the heavy weights. You need both of them to be able to kind of fine tune your entire machine. Do you think it's not just the fulfillment, but it's also kind of out of the comfort zone of like, I'm going to hear some emotional stuff. I'm going to get there. So when we're talking about, do the Bulls need a point guard? It's a little bit easier and more just enjoyable for me to talk about that, because I just spent an hour learning about somebody that, like, those tender moments that nobody sees in public, that you don't see on social media.
Yeah, exactly. And it really puts things in perspective. Is when you're too deep in something, and you're kind of grinding it out like every day on one thing, like you kind of lose perspective sometimes, where you feel like, oh man, I got to get this done. This is like the most important thing, and then you realize, you take a step back, and it's like, it's just sports. It's just kid games that you're discussing. Like, you don't need to be stressing out over
Amen.
uh who's going to be the next point guard for for the Bulls. Like, it's not that important. It's fun.
It's fun.
It's a great
Yes.
conversation. It's enjoyable, but in the grand scheme of things, there's real life stuff happening. And for me, doing both these things and expanding my creative group, just juices, and expanding my thought process on these things, is I need to, the more you do something, and the more you do something you love, the more you find out about yourself. So I think doing this for so long, and it doesn't seem long when you think about it. I've only been doing this for like 7-8 years or so. You do kind of hit a rut. And when I did the podcast for my birthday, I took a vacation. I was like, look, man, I gotta stop. I gotta adjust, because I had been going basically a year straight with no vacation.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Just all in, because that's that the grind mentality, right? Of like, in this job is essentially kind of like I'm in a comfortable spot now. Those years of grinding, those overnight work that you kind of forget important. This pandemic kind of helped out with that. Where it's like, look, I shouldn't be just focusing on what's the next game I got to look at, or what's the next, like, I got family, my family is growing, now, like, my brothers, they're getting married, one of my brothers is having a child soon.
Mazel tov.
My family is thanks,
Yeah.
is growing and expanding, and I want to be present here with that, and doing this project that I'm doing out of Gill Enterprises. It's really putting everything in perspective. Like, I love sports. It's my number one, thing. It's the reason why I wanted to do this thing, entirely. But also putting in perspective, like, in order for me to get better as a producer, as a creator, as a as a creative mind. And as I progress in my career, as I reach new levels and things that's higher up, like, it's important to make sure that I keep my personal growth growing in order for the creative growth to keep going.
And this is why it's so important too to keep good company. And it's the one thing you and I have talked about every single time you and I get a chance to chit chat. It's like taking the advice, and whether you do all of it or not, it's just listening to people are doing it the right way. And whether or not you have the same goals of them, it's to take that and to really incorporate it into your own way with your own strategy. And for anybody who's interested in what we're talking about today and want to do any further information, check out our guy Tony on Twitter at the Tony Gill. Send him an email. Get this thing set up. If you really want to set up a nice message, do something one of a kind, something that you can't just buy at Walmart or on Amazon. Send him an email at anthonygill56@gmail.com. Tony, we're running up against the clock as we, I know I promised you 10 minutes and all of a sudden it becomes 20 minutes. This always happens. I'm sorry. But last few things, what have you really taken from this? Like, what is something that you've taken from the people you've seen? What is a common message? What is something that you feel people just don't seem to be able to do face to face, but have the comfortability of all of a sudden being able to do it in this way? What is a message that you keep seeing that kind of surprised you a little bit, was harder for them to tell a person face to face if that's not available?
I think one thing that I've learned is it's kind of like the model of, the business that, that this is everybody has a story. And we spend so much time in our own little bubbles, in our own little spaces, in our own little vacuums, with our own little ideals, and thinking that we're 100% right 100% of the time. Our way of thinking is the best way of thinking, and everybody should think like us. And it's absolutely 100% not true whatsoever. And to be a better human being and to do this life thing as best as we can, you got to be able to see what other people's stories and what other people's mindsets are. Like, you just have to. And this really showed me that my small-minded way of thinking should expand. And I'm in no ways like, the worst, person, but everybody has biases. Everybody has, preconceived notions and things like that. And to be able to get over those, seeing these people doing this work with these people, and it's not like I'm not doing this out of the goodness of my heart. Like, I do get paid to do this.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
But the fact is, having these people in their vulnerable spaces, telling their truth and discussing their truths, their family truths and stuff like that. And like, every one of those is important. Every one of those is important. And for me, it was kind of like a reaffirmation, right? It's like we initially know a lot of all this stuff. It's just putting these things into practice and explain these things to other people and sharing this to other people. And I think it really has impacted me, so far, in terms of my growth as a human. And I think it benefits, and it's very cathartic for the people that are doing this as well, because now all the thoughts that they've had that they've wanted to say or may not have been comfortable saying before, or questions that they may have had, now they can do that in this kind of safe space of listening and just being able to speak freely. And I think that's 100% what people should be able to do, just to better their own minds. Like, not being able to express yourself fully or not knowing how to do it is frustrating. It can be frustrating when people don't seem to understand you, or a person may not get you 100% fully, but being able to jump on a podcast and express who you are and your thoughts, and be able to listen to other people's thoughts, like, it's hard to explain into words, but once you feel it, it's the greatest feeling ever. And that's kind of what I want to provide for people.
And this is why, I love the project that you're doing. I was so excited to see that you were doing this. And I wanted to get you on here on Outreach Radio Chicago for the fact that I wanted to show people that if they don't listen to sports and they're not into NBC Sports, which are great products and you guys should be into them, but if they're not, that you got to see the dude behind the project. You got to see the man behind the intentions. And I think there's nobody, I think people in the industry and people who know you will agree with this, that there's no better heart and soul that's doing this. And this is a project that I hope we see more of in different ways, in different creative ways. But the idea that Tony Gill, our big Tony, is the guy that came up with this amazing concept, nothing but love for you, brother, on that. With that, any final thoughts, anything you want to tell the people if they're interested in this, what they can do, what can they expect? Other than that, I mean, I think the elevator pitch worked here on Outreach Radio Chicago.
Yeah, so if you're interested in recording a special conversation or just you can have me, if you want, I can interview you on a topic of your choosing where you can get your thoughts out. I can do that. You can email me at Anthony Gill, that's Gill with 2 L's, 56 @gmail.com. My prices are very, very low, if I can put it that way, considering
they're valuable.
Yeah, what you're going to be getting. You're going to get a fully produced podcast episode with music and proper editing, where it seems like you're listening to a movie about you and about your life and about a story that you want to give or you want to gift someone. Like I'm telling you, it's nothing like that than giving somebody a special podcast that is geared towards them specifically in a time full of on-demand watching and on-demand listening. This is a personal project that you can have or that you can give to someone else the opportunity to do that. So again, you can email me at Anthony Gill with 2 L's @gmail.com. And then we can get you set up.
Yeah, and make sure you follow him on Twitter at the Tony Gill. And this is the best way that it's kind of just playing in my mind. It's like you send out a beautiful tweet or a awesome Facebook post about somebody or a moment. This is something that they can hold on to. It doesn't get lost in the algorithm. This is something that's special, that's one of a kind, and it coming from our guy Tony Gill doesn't get any better than that. It's not very, very low prices. It's valuable prices, my friends. The one and only Tony Gill here on Outreach Radio Chicago with Mike Mercado. Tony, thank you so much, brother.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back with more Outreach Radio Chicago with Mike Mercado in just a moment. And that'll do it for us on this edition of Outreach Radio Chicago. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. A huge thank you to Tony Gill for joining us on this edition of Outreach Radio Chicago. Make sure you guys are checking out his work as he helps connect people along with all the amazing work he's doing at NBC Sports Chicago by following him on Twitter at the Tony Gill. With that, you can follow me all over the universe. You can follow us all over the universe. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media, Instagram, Mike Mercado Media, and you can keep up to date with everything I'm doing outside of Outreach Radio Chicago by following me on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves and at Outreach Radio Chicago. If you have a charity, foundation, or a cool story you would like to hit the airwaves that you would like spotlighted here in the city of Chicago, send us an email over at outreachradiochicago@gmail.com. And visit us wherever you get your favorite podcast at Mercado Airwaves. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. We will see you next time here on Outreach Radio Chicago. I'm Mike Mercado.